everyone, welcome back to part 2 of our 3-part series on arsenic. Today we're talking about the haunting history of arsenic and how people of the 19th century were practically bathing in it. Between unintentionally killing themselves and purposely poisoning each other, people were dying left and right from this quiet killer. And those that weren't dying were very sick. We'll be diving into all of those details in this episode. But first, what exactly is arsenic, and why was it so deadly? Although we mostly hear of arsenic in relation to the Victorian era, the deadly poison wasn't new to the 19th century. In fact, all the way back to the Roman Empire, it was considered the king of poisons, or the poison of kings. It went both ways. But even before it was used to carry out assassinations, it's been around as a natural chemical. It sits as number 33 on the periodic table of elements, and occurs naturally in the environment in both organic and inorganic forms. The type to adversely affect human health is inorganic arsenic, and even today, lethal levels can be unintentionally leaked into people's water, food, and air supplies. The Environmental Protection Agency now has a standard of arsenic in drinking water of 10 parts per billion, which is stricter than the previous standard of 50 parts per billion. Personally, I don't really want any levels of arsenic in my water, but thankfully to my knowledge, my water is safe. Unfortunately, not all of America can say the same. In many states like California, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, Michigan, and Maine, in as many as 1 in 5 wells have arsenic levels above the EPA standard. Arsenic poisoning can cause a ton of health problems. Large amounts can cause serious sickness and death, and prolonged exposure can cause skin, bladder, lung cancer, as well as heart disease and a reduction in IQ. So if arsenic has been around forever and was specifically used as a poison before the 19th century, why were so many people suddenly getting sick and dying from it during the Victorian era? To answer that, let's take a closer look at how it was being used. There's this generally accepted idea that women were using arsenic to poison men at an alarmingly high rate. The perfect tool for a woman to quietly rid herself of an unwanted husband, arsenic was easy to come by, tasteless, odorless, and commonly mistaken for diseases like cholera and typhoid. Men took part in more gruesome murders using their strength as a weapon, and now women could overpower them by slipping a little poison into dinner. This idea spread throughout society, and even innocent deaths weren't free from the gossiping neighbors speculating something more sinister. But personally, I think the number of actual murders committed with arsenic was far less than the amount speculated. Hearing that Margaret down the street did away with her no-good husband was a way more exciting story to share with your friends over tea than someone dying from disease. Not to mention the countless businessmen who directly profited from the public thinking women were poisoning people with arsenic, rather than the truth that their products were incredibly deadly. And what products were those, you ask? Well, pretty much everything, but let's start with wallpaper. As luxury items became more available and affordable, people started to decorate their homes with intensely colored wallpaper. The more vibrant and detailed the paper, the better. The problem is that in order to produce such vivid colors, the manufacturers used arsenic. Not just a dash here and there, but industrial quantities of it. Remember in the last episode we talked about Mary Ann Cotton citing wallpaper as the reason her stepson Charles got sick and died? That wasn't an excuse pulled out of thin air. It was actually happening around that time. And although there were reports of children dying after ingesting the wallpaper, you didn't have to eat arsenic to die from it. Particles from the wallpaper could flake off into the air, particularly with flocked paper. Or, if the wallpaper becomes damp or moldy, a chemical reaction occurs, causing the creation of toxic arsenic gases. And it was so much more than just wallpaper. Candles, hat ornaments, clothing, painted toys, stuffed animals, wrapping paper, wine, beer, candy, cosmetics, even medicine all contained arsenic. And the list goes on. Basically, anything green probably contained arsenic. Why green? Because prior to the 1800s, certain dyes like green were typically dull and muted. It wasn't until Scheele's green became widely available that people started to see bright and vibrant shades of green in both luxury and everyday items. The color was named after Swedish chemist Carl Wilhelm Scheele, who created the pigment in 1775. And in order to produce such beautiful shades of green, arsenic was a component in his invention. Some sources I read claimed that Scheele actually knew of the dangers before sharing the pigment with the world. And after Scheele's green was available, other greens such as Paris green and emerald green also emerged and were just as toxic. The horrible part about all of this is the deadly pigment and use of arsenic in items in general was never technically banned in England, despite other countries banning it as early as 1845. There was an attempt to ban it in 1880, but the law didn't pass. It's difficult to understand why people would allow the continuation of such deadly products, but the answer is, of course, the root of all evil: money. Businessmen and manufacturers were making far too much money from these products to stop. In particular, artist and designer William Morris, who designed and produced wallpaper. He was outspoken against claims that arsenic in wallpaper was causing illness and death, and went as far to say that doctors diagnosing sick patients with arsenic poisoning were quacks and bitten by witch fever, implying that they were on a witch hunt, so to speak, and that the wallpaper wasn't dangerous. Side note, there's this fantastic book titled Bitten by Witch Fever that shows examples of vibrant 1800s wallpaper and discusses the story of William Morris and deadly Victorian wallpaper that I'm just dying to get my hands on. I'll keep you updated if I do. Anyway, of course a producer of dangerous products would deny the dangers. But what's more alarming is the fact Morris was also the heir to the largest copper mine in the world at that time. The copper mine produced large amounts of arsenic dust as a result of the mining, so in addition to having huge environmental impacts in the area, it also caused many miners to die from lung disease. And like the miners, workers in factories producing wallpaper and other items containing arsenic were becoming ill as well. Thankfully, towards the late 1800s, consumers in England were finally starting to put the pieces together and ultimately started demanding and purchasing items created without arsenic, eventually phasing it out altogether. With all of this, I can't help but wonder how many people were victims to accidental arsenic poisoning and how many people were wrongly accused of poisoning a loved one because of it. And furthermore, what could people be using now in their day-to-day lives that could also have deadly effects? Tell me what you think about all of this in the comments, and if there's a specific haunting history you'd like me to talk about, tell me about that too. And if you like this video and want to see more, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out. Thanks for watching. Goodbye!